1958. A woman stands at her stove in the same size she wore on her wedding day. 4 children later. No scale. No app. No calorie ever counted. You've been sold the powders, the pills, the point systems, a whole industry built on one promise it never keeps. She was thinner than any of it, with none of it in her house. It wasn't willpower. It was a real breakfast, a plate the right size, a kitchen that closed at night, and a day on her feet. Then the industry replaced all of it with something you'd have to buy forever, and the weight came and stayed. This is all of it gathered in one place. Every forgotten trick that kept these women the same size for 50 years. And everyone still works because the body never changed. Only who got paid when we forgot? Settle in. Let's begin. Her name was Jean. In 1955, she got married in a dress with a 23-inch waist. In 1985, 30 years and 4 children later, she wore that same dress to her daughter's wedding. Same waist. Same woman. She never counted a calorie in her life. She never owned a scale, a food journal, or a subscription to anything. Look at what we've been handed instead. The apps, the powders, the point systems, the pills, a whole industry worth more money than you can picture, built on one promise it never quite keeps. And Jean was thinner than any of it ever made anyone, with none of it in her house. You've been told it was willpower, that women back then simply had more of it than we do. That is not true, and the timeline proves it. What kept Jean's waist the same for 30 years was not discipline. It was a handful of ordinary habits, so small she never thought to name them, and every single one of them was quietly taken from you and sold back at a price. 15 of those tricks. Number 1 is the one the food industry spent the most money making you forget. Before number 15, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to bring back. Then let's go. Number 15, the real breakfast that held her till noon. 2 eggs cracked into butter, toast, black coffee. 8 minutes, real food, and it kept her full for 4 or 5 hours without a single thought of eating again. Whole food protein and fat send a strong, steady fullness signal to the brain and barely move your blood sugar. So there was no spike, no mid-morning crash, and no crash means no craving. She wasn't skipping breakfast, and she wasn't eating a sugary one. She was eating a real one, and it did the one job breakfast is supposed to do. It held her calm and full all the way to lunch. Now, before I give you number 14, I have to stop and tell you something. These 15 are the tricks I could fit into one video, but there are far more. Every meal, every method, every ordinary habit that kept these women a steady size for 50 years, written down plainly so you can start tonight. I've gathered all of it into one book, The Vanished Table, the wisdom they took from our grandmothers. It's not a subscription, nothing to sign up for, nothing to buy every month. It's the knowledge in your hands once, the way it used to be, passed down at the kitchen table. The link is right below this video in the description. And if there's someone in your life who's tried every diet and is worn out from it, a mother, a sister, a friend, get it for her too. She needs it more than she knows. Now, let's keep going. Number 14. The plate was smaller. Jean's dinner plates measured 9 inches across. The standard plate today is 12 inches across. That's not a small difference. 3 inches of diameter is roughly 50% more surface area, which means 50% more food before the plate even looks full. And the plate is the cue the brain reads before the stomach ever gets a vote. A full 9-inch plate told her she'd eaten a full meal, and she had. Nobody in that kitchen felt deprived because the plate was full. It was just the right size. Restaurants didn't grow the plate because you needed more food. They grew it because there was money in your finishing it. Number 13, the kitchen closed between meals. Between breakfast and lunch, between lunch and dinner, the kitchen was simply closed. Not by willpower, but by habit so complete she never thought about it. Hunger between meals wasn't a problem to solve with a handful of something. It was just a normal feeling of a body between meals, and it meant dinner would taste good. Constant grazing keeps the body's fat storage switch flipped on all day. The clean stretch between meals is when it finally gets to burn instead of store. The entire snack industry was invented to fill that gap, to convince a body that felt fine that it needed something at 10 in the morning. Jean never had the product, so she never had the problem. Number 12, black coffee, 2 calories, and that was the whole cup. The percolator went on and she drank it black or with a little real cream. 2 calories. No syrup, no whipped anything, no sugar by the spoonful. The caffeine gave a small, genuine lift to her metabolism and gently blunted her appetite, which is exactly why it fit a morning that wasn't reaching for food. The drink they replaced it with wears the word coffee on the label and carries as many calories as a full meal. A large sweet coffee drink today has more calories than Jean's entire lunch. She drank the 2-calorie version every day of her life and never once thought of it as a diet. Number 11, real fat, and she wasn't afraid of it. Butter in the pan, cream in the coffee, whole milk, not skim. In Jean's kitchen, the fat was not the enemy. It was the point, because fat is what makes a meal hold you. It slows the rise of blood sugar, so there's no spike and no crash, and it sends its own powerful fullness signal. When the guidelines later told everyone to strip the fat out, the food that replaced it had to add sugar just to taste like anything, and people traded the thing that kept them full for the thing that made them hungrier. That trade is written on waistlines to this day. Jean kept the butter, and the dress still fit at 50. Number 10. Sugar was for Sunday. The sugar bowl sat on her table in plain sight, and still she ate less than half the sugar we do, not from discipline, but because sugar hadn't yet been inserted into everything else. In 1960, Americans ate about 23 pounds of added sugar a year. Today it's nearly 60. The gap isn't dessert. It's the sugar hiding in the bread, the pasta sauce, the salad dressing, the peanut butter, sugar in 100 foods nobody agreed to put it in. A 1950s tomato sauce was tomatoes, garlic, oil, and oregano. A leading jar today runs to more than 20 ingredients. Jean's sugar was rare, which is the only condition under which sugar gives you what it's supposed to: genuine pleasure. Her daughter still remembers the one birthday cake because there was one, and it was worth remembering. Number 9, water and milk. That was the table. Milk for the children, water for the adults, coffee after. Soda existed, 6.5-ounce Coca-Cola, the only size they made, and it showed up on Friday nights. A standard 20-ounce bottle today carries 240 calories. The global beverage industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and every dollar of it replaced something that either cost nothing or came in a glass bottle to the door. Water can't be trademarked. Milk can't hold up an industry. So something else was invented, and we started drinking a meal's worth of calories a day without ever sitting down. Number 8, 3 meals at the same times every single day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. At fixed hours, the household ran on, and nothing in between. A body given the same rhythm every day settles into it with steadier blood sugar, steadier hunger, and steadier energy. When meals land at a different time every day, or get skipped, or slide late on the weekend, the whole system loses its footing and the hunger gets harder to control. Jean's day had 3 anchors dropped at the same spots every day, and everything held steady around them. The meal replacement shakes and the all-day grazing both fight against this. She just ate at the same times, like winding a clock. Number 7, she moved through the entire day. In 1960, the word exercise meant something soldiers did. For everyone else, it had no category. You didn't work out, you just lived. A morning meant making beds, carrying laundry to the line, walking to the butcher, then the baker, then the market with everything in her arms. Dinner meant 2 hours on her feet. Researchers call this ordinary, unscheduled movement non-exercise activity, and it accounts for hundreds and hundreds of calories a day burned before anyone would ever call it a workout. Jean burned them carrying groceries home. The fitness industry sells her granddaughter at a monthly fee the movement Jean got for free just by living her day. If you're finding this useful and there's a woman in your life who's fought her weight for years and is tired of it, take 1 second and hit the like button right now. It puts this video in front of her. She needs it more than she knows. Then stay, because the last few tricks are the ones that matter most. Number 6, she cooked everything from scratch. The pantry held flour, butter, eggs, potatoes, onions, and whatever was in season. And those things required cooking. That cooking was its own protection. When you make a meal from scratch, there's no corn syrup in the pot roast because you didn't put it there, and no strange starches in the soup because it came from yesterday's chicken. Not a can. Home-cooked food is simply less calorie-dense than its packaged equivalent. It fills you on fewer calories because it hasn't been engineered to do the opposite. Jean ate the bread and the butter both, and the dress still fit because the food on her table was food, not a product built to make you keep eating. Number 5, something filling came before the meal. Half a grapefruit before breakfast. A cup of broth or a bowl of simple soup before dinner. Sounds like a diet trick. And it quietly was, but nobody called it that. Something light and filling, eaten first, takes up room in the stomach before the main food arrives, and slows the whole pace of the meal, so you naturally eat less of what follows without a shred of willpower. The grapefruit was high in water and fiber and took real effort to eat. The broth warmed you and filled you. She wasn't restricting. She was letting her own stomach do the work the easy way before the plate ever landed. Number 4, she served the plate and put the pot away. Dinner came plated from the stove, and the pot went back to the counter, not the table. There was no serving dish sitting in front of you refilling itself, no going back for a second and third helping, because it was right there. She decided the portion once, at the stove, and then the food was across the room. Out of reach is out of mind. The simple act of not keeping the food on the table in front of everyone did more for portion control than any measuring cup ever could. You ate your plate, and the meal was over, because the meal was already put away. Number 3, she ate at the table slowly with her family. Dinner was sat down for at a table with people in conversation, not standing at the counter, not in the car, not in front of 3 hours of television with a bag of something. And that mattered more than it sounds. It takes the body around 20 minutes to register that it's full, and a meal eaten slowly in company gives that signal time to arrive before you've overeaten. A meal inhaled in front of a screen is a meal your stomach never got to weigh in on. The bag is empty, and you never even felt it. Jean ate slowly because dinner was an occasion, not a task, and her body always had time to say when it had had enough. Number 2, the long, quiet gap between dinner and breakfast. She finished supper in the early evening and ate nothing again until morning. Not as a rule she was following, but because there was simply nothing in the house engineered to pull her back into the kitchen at 9 at night. So the hours between dinner and breakfast were long and empty and the same every day. That long overnight stretch is when the body finally does its repair and it's burning uninterrupted without new food constantly arriving. It's one of the most natural, gentle patterns there is, and she lived it without effort because the midnight snack and the late night drive-through simply hadn't been invented yet. Her evenings ended, the kitchen went quiet, and her body got the long, calm night it was built for. When I started pulling this together, I expected to find that these women had faster metabolisms, or better genes, or more willpower than the rest of us. That is not what the record shows. What it shows is a food world that had not yet been engineered to pull money out of hunger. Not one trick on this list was a punishment. Not one required a subscription, a powder, or a number to count. Several of them are the opposite of restriction: a full plate, real fat, a real breakfast, food she actually enjoyed. The industry didn't sell you a smaller waist. It sold you the sugary breakfast that spikes you, the giant portions that stretch your appetite, the all-day snacks, and the midnight kitchen. And then it sold you the pills to fix the problem its own products created. Number one is where that lands hardest. Number one, the kitchen that closed the whole rhythm, kept every single day. This is not a food and not a trick. It's the thread that ran through all 14 of the others. Jean ate the same way, at the same times, on the same plates, with the same quiet evenings, every single day of her adult life. Not because she was disciplined in the way we're taught to think of discipline, but because it was simply her life, worn smooth by repetition until it took no effort at all. And a body given the same steady signal every day settles into a rhythm that quietly holds the weight where it belongs. It was never one perfect meal. It was the same good enough meal, eaten the same way, 10,000 days in a row. That is what was taken. Not the eggs, not the coffee, you can still buy those. The rhythm, the closed kitchen, the fixed table, the quiet night, handed down from her mother's kitchen to hers. A whole way of living that asked for consistency instead of willpower. The industry stepped into that kitchen and said, "You don't need her steady rhythm, you need our new product," and the rhythm broke, and the sugary breakfast and the endless snacks and the midnight kitchen poured into the space where it used to be. Jean passed away in her 70s, the same size she'd been her whole life. Her daughter found the wedding dress folded in a cedar chest and held it up in the mirror. She set it down. She didn't remember her mother ever being on a diet because there had never been one. What she remembered was a kitchen, the smell of coffee and eggs at the same hour every morning, a pot roast on Sunday, a table everyone sat down at, a rhythm that kept a woman exactly herself for 50 years. Those 15 tricks cost less across a whole year than a single month of the pills they'll sell you now. None required a subscription. None required a powder or a number to count. None required believing that your body, left to a steady and well-fed rhythm, was ever the problem. What changed between Jean's kitchen and yours was not what the body needs. That has not changed. What changed was who got paid when the rhythm broke. So pick one thing from this list: the real breakfast, the smaller plate, the closed kitchen, the quiet night, and do it the same way every day for the next month. Then come back to the comments and tell me what changed. And tell me one more thing while you're down there. Which of these did your mother or your grandmother actually do? Whose kitchen do you still remember? I read every single comment. The next video is ready. I'll see you there. She ate fried chicken, cornbread with butter, greens swimming in pork fat, pie on Sunday, a full plate 3 times a day. And she was slim her entire life. She never counted a calorie, never read a label, never saw the inside of a gym. Meanwhile, you count everything, track every macro, pay for the gym, buy the diet food, and it is a fight every single day. It is not willpower. She was not stronger than you. It is not your genes. It is the food. Specific foods that sat on her plate every day have been quietly taken off yours and swapped for something that makes you hungrier. And that one swap is the whole difference between her body and the struggle you have been sold. She was not slim despite what she ate. She was slim because of what she ate. And every food that kept her that way is still sitting on a grocery shelf right now, waiting to be put back. Here are the 15. Miss the one at number 3 and none of the rest will work. So stay to the end. And not one of them requires counting a single calorie. Number 15. Beans cooked from dry, eaten several times a week. A pot of pinto beans, red beans, black-eyed peas, or butter beans was on the table constantly, cooked from dry with a piece of pork and eaten in real quantity. Beans are one of the most powerful natural weight-regulating foods that exists, and the mechanism is now well documented. They are extremely high in soluble fiber and resistant starch, which slow digestion, blunt the blood sugar response, and feed the gut bacteria that regulate appetite and metabolism. A bowl of beans keeps a person full for hours. Genuinely full, not white-knuckling it. And the fullness is the whole point, because a woman who is genuinely full does not snack, does not graze, does not go looking for something an hour later. The resistant starch in cooked and cooled beans has an additional effect. It feeds the production of short-chain fatty acids in the gut that further improve how the body handles blood sugar and fat storage. She ate beans several times a week and never thought about any of this. The modern plate replaced the daily bowl of beans with refined carbohydrates that spike blood sugar and leave a person hungry an hour later. The beans were doing quiet work every single day, at a cost of pennies per serving. Number 14. Greens cooked low and slow with pot liquor. Collard, mustard, and turnip greens simmered for an hour with a smoked hock, eaten in large servings with the pot liquor. Greens are almost pure fiber, water, and micronutrients, enormous volume, very few calories, tremendous fullness. Eating a large plate of greens fills the stomach and satisfies the appetite for a fraction of the caloric cost of almost anything else. There is a specific principle behind this that nutrition researchers now call energy density. Foods with a lot of volume and few calories, greens are the extreme example, fill the stomach and trigger the stretch receptors that signal fullness, while delivering almost no calories in the process. A person eating high volume, low calorie food gets full before they get too many calories, automatically, without measuring anything. The fiber slows everything that comes after it, and the pot liquor delivered the water-soluble nutrients that keep the body running efficiently. A woman who ate a big plate of greens at dinner was filling up on the single most weight-friendly food category in existence, and she was doing it because it tasted good, not because she was dieting. Number 13. Cornbread made from stone ground cornmeal, not sugar. Real cornbread in 1955 was made from stone ground cornmeal, buttermilk, egg, and fat with little or no sugar. This matters enormously. Stone ground cornmeal retains the German brand, delivering fiber and slow-releasing complex carbohydrates that keep blood sugar stable. The modern version, cake-like sweet, made from degerminated cornmeal and loaded with sugar, is a completely different food that spikes blood sugar and drives hunger. Her cornbread was a stable, satisfying, fiber-rich starch. The cornbread that replaced it is essentially dessert. Same name, opposite effect on the body. Number 12. Real butter and animal fat, used freely. She cooked in lard, spread real butter, seasoned with bacon grease, and never feared any of it, and the fat was part of why she stayed slim. Fat is the most satiating macronutrient. It triggers the hormones that tell the brain the body is full and satisfied, and it slows the absorption of everything eaten alongside it, blunting blood sugar spikes. This is the exact opposite of what the low-fat era taught. And the low-fat era got it backwards in a way that made people heavier, not lighter. When the fat came out of the food, something had to replace it to make the food palatable, and that something was almost always sugar and refined starch, which digest fast, spike blood sugar, and leave the body hungry again quickly. So the low-fat swap did not just fail to help, it actively drove the grazing and overeating it was supposed to prevent. A meal cooked with real fat left her genuinely satisfied, which meant she was not hungry again 2 hours later and not snacking between meals. The fat she ate freely was keeping her full and keeping her from grazing all day, which is the entire game when it comes to staying slim without effort. Number 11. Eggs eaten every morning. A real breakfast of eggs, cooked in butter or bacon grease, was standard. Eggs are one of the most complete and satiating foods available. High-quality protein and fat that keep a person full through the entire morning. A woman who ate eggs for breakfast was not hungry at 10, not reaching for a snack before lunch, not riding a blood sugar roller coaster from a sweet breakfast. Protein at breakfast is now understood to be one of the most effective levers for appetite control across the entire day. Eating protein early blunts the hunger hormone and sustains fullness in a way that carbohydrate breakfasts cannot, and it reduces the total amount a person eats later in the day almost automatically. The modern breakfast of cereal, pastries, sweetened coffee, and juice is almost pure sugar, engineered to spike and crash and leave a person hungry by mid-morning, which sets up snacking, overeating at lunch, and grazing that runs until bedtime. The eggs she started her day with set up the whole day for stable appetite and no grazing, and she ate them simply because that was breakfast. Before number 10, every piece of forgotten wisdom I have recovered is documented in the description below. Number 10. Sweet potatoes instead of processed starches. The sweet potato was a staple, grown cheap, and eaten often. It is one of the most weight-friendly starches available, high in fiber, filling rich in nutrients, and gentler on blood sugar than white potatoes or refined grains, especially when not drowned in sugar. A sweet potato satisfies and sustains. It fills the plate and the stomach without the blood sugar chaos of processed starch. The fiber in a sweet potato slows the release of its natural sugars into the bloodstream, which means steady energy instead of a spike and a crash. And steady energy means stable appetite instead of the hunger swings that drive overeating. She built meals around this naturally slimming root vegetable because it grew in the ground cheaply. And it was doing far more for her body than the refined starches, the white bread, the instant potatoes, the box sides that replaced it on the modern plate. The food she treated as humble and everyday is now sold as a health food store superfood at a premium price. Number 9. Fermented foods at every meal. Pickled vegetables, chow chow, homemade hot sauce, buttermilk. Fermented foods were on the table constantly, in small amounts at almost every meal. The gut microbiome is now understood to be central to weight regulation, and fermented foods are among the most powerful tools for supporting it. The beneficial bacteria they deliver improve insulin sensitivity, reduce the inflammation associated with weight gain, and help regulate the hormones that control appetite. The research here is some of the most exciting in modern nutrition. The composition of a person's gut bacteria appears to influence how many calories they extract from food, how they store fat, and how strong their cravings are, and a diverse, well-fed microbiome is associated with a leaner, more stable body. Fermented foods feed and diversify that microbiome directly. She ate these foods because they were traditional and delicious and preserved the harvest, and they were quietly optimizing the gut system that modern science now knows governs body weight. The modern plate has almost no live fermented food on it at all, and the probiotic supplement industry now sells at $40 a bottle the organisms she was getting free from a crock in the cellar. Number 8. Bone broth and gelatin-rich cooking. The ham hocks, neck bones, oxtails, and pig feet simmered for hours released collagen and gelatin into everything she cooked. Gelatin-rich broth is deeply satiating, supports the gut lining that governs so much of metabolism and appetite, and provides protein in a highly usable form. A pot of greens or beans cooked with a collagen-rich cut was more filling and more nourishing than the same dish made lean. The bone broth industry now sells this exact thing at premium prices as a weight and wellness product. She got it free, in every pot, because she cooked with the whole animal. Number 7. Water, buttermilk, and unsweetened drinks instead of liquid sugar. What she drank was as important as what she ate. Water, buttermilk, coffee lightly, sweetened or unsweetened iced tea. A Coca-Cola was a rare treat in a small 6.5-ounce bottle, not a daily fixture. This is one of the single biggest hidden differences between her plate and the modern one. Liquid sugar, soda, sweetened coffee drinks, juice, energy drinks, sweet tea in enormous portions, delivers hundreds of calories a day that the body does not register as food and does not compensate for by eating less. This is the crucial mechanism. When a person drinks their calories, the body does not reduce how much it eats at the next meal to account for them. The liquid calories are simply added on top of everything else, invisibly, day after day. A single large modern soda can carry more sugar than she ate in several days. The 6.5-ounce bottle she had as an occasional treat carried about 80 calories. The 32-ounce fountain drink that replaced it carries more than 4 times that. She simply did not drink her calories. The constant stream of liquid sugar that defines the modern diet did not exist on her table, and its absence alone accounts for a significant share of why she stayed slim. Number 6. Small portions of dessert, made from scratch, eaten occasionally. Dessert existed: the pound cake, the sweet potato pie, the peach cobbler, the tea cakes, but it was made from scratch, eaten in modest portions, and reserved largely for Sundays and special occasions. It was not a daily entitlement, not an after every meal habit, not the constant stream of processed sweets that fills the modern day. When sweetness is occasional, the body handles it easily. When it is constant, the body cannot keep up. She had her cobbler on Sunday and did not think about sugar again until the next Sunday, and that rhythm of occasional real dessert kept sweetness in its place instead of letting it flood the system daily. Number 5. Whole milk and full-fat dairy. The milk was whole. The dairy was full fat. And contrary to decades of low-fat dogma, the research now suggests full-fat dairy is associated with better weight outcomes than the low-fat versions that replaced it. The fat in whole milk is satiating and slows the absorption of the milk sugars, while the skim and low-fat products that replaced it digest faster and often had sugar added to compensate for the lost flavor and texture. The whole milk she drank kept her fuller and more satisfied than the low-fat products a later era told her were healthier. The full-fat dairy was working with her body, not against it. Number 4. Meat on the bone, eaten as part of a balanced plate. The meat she ate came on the bone, cooked with care, and served as one component of a plate, balanced with greens, beans, and a starch, not as an oversized boneless portion dominating everything. This structure mattered. Bone and meat is eaten more slowly, which gives the body time to register fullness before overeating. And a plate where meat was balanced by large servings of fiber-rich vegetables and legumes was naturally portioned by its own composition. She was not measuring anything. The traditional structure of the plate, meat as one part, vegetables and beans as the bulk, did the portioning automatically. Number 3, nothing processed, because processed food barely existed yet. Here is the simplest and most powerful truth on this list. In 1955, in most Black households, the food was made from whole ingredients because the processed alternatives had not yet arrived in force. There were no snack aisles engineered by food scientists to override the body's fullness signals. No ultra-processed foods designed to be impossible to stop eating. No hyper-palatable combinations of sugar, fat, salt, and additives calibrated to make a person eat past satisfaction. The modern research on ultra-processed food is damning. People eat significantly more calories when fed ultra-processed food, without noticing, because the food is engineered to defeat the body's natural regulation. She never faced that food. Her whole food plate let her body's own appetite regulation work exactly as it was designed to. Number 2, she ate at the table, on a schedule, and stopped when the kitchen closed. The foods mattered, but so did the pattern. 3 meals at the table, eaten at regular times, with the kitchen closing after dinner and staying closed until morning. No constant grazing. No eating in front of a screen. No late night snacking, because there was nothing engineered on the shelf to pull her back into the kitchen. This produced a natural overnight fast of 12 to 14 hours every single night. The exact pattern that modern research on time-restricted eating now confirms supports a stable, healthy weight. She was doing intermittent fasting every night of her life without a name for it, simply because that was how a household ran. The structure did the work that willpower is now asked to do alone. Number 1, she never once thought of food as the enemy. This is the one that ties every other food on this list together. A Black woman in 1955 did not view eating as a battle. She did not count, restrict, fear, or feel guilty about food. She cooked it with love, served it with pride, ate it with pleasure, and stopped when she was full because her body told her to, and because the food she was eating let that signal work. The whole apparatus of modern diet culture, the counting, the guilt, the restriction, the fear, the endless war between a woman and her plate did not exist, and its absence was itself part of why she stayed slim. Here is the cruel irony the diet industry will never tell you. The counting and restricting and fearing that define the modern relationship with food do not produce the slim, healthy body she had. They often produce the opposite: the stress, the deprivation, the binge cycle, the metabolic chaos that comes from treating food as an enemy. She was slim because she ate real food in a real structure with a peaceful mind and let her body do what bodies are designed to do when they are fed properly and left alone. The foods that kept her slim were taken off the plate one at a time and replaced with processed food, liquid sugar, low-fat products, and constant grazing. And then the diet industry arrived to sell her granddaughters the solution to a problem the food industry had created. The solution was never a diet. The solution was the food she was already eating in 1955. Every food on this list is still available. The beans still fill you up. The greens still work. The eggs still hold you through the morning. The real fat still satisfies. The whole food plate still lets your body regulate itself the way hers did. You do not need to count a single calorie. You need to put back on your plate what was quietly taken off it. Pick one food from this list. Put it back on your plate this week. Come back in the comments and tell me which one you started with. The next video is ready. Look at any photograph from 1955. A church in Birmingham on a Sunday morning. A neighborhood block party in Memphis in July. Women in cotton dresses standing outside a grocery on a Tuesday afternoon. Look at the women. Not Lena Horne in a gown. Not Dorothy Dandridge on a magazine cover. The ordinary women. The one carrying bags home from the market on 4th Avenue. The one on the stoop talking to her neighbor. The one in the kitchen at 9 in the morning with the stove already warm. None of them are heavy. Not one. An entire community of women eating collard greens cooked in pot liquor, frying chicken in cast iron on Sunday, making cornbread from scratch, putting real butter on everything, and not one of them counting a single calorie, not one of them trying. That is not a coincidence, and somebody knew it. In 1955, the average black woman in America weighed somewhere in the range of 130 to 145 pounds. She did not have a gym membership, a step counter, a food journal, or a protein supplement. She had a kitchen, a table, and a set of habits so ordinary she never thought to name them. Neither did anyone else on her block because everyone was eating the same way. Then the food industry arrived in her neighborhood. It looked like progress. It came in packages with long shelf lives and low prices and advertising in Ebony magazine. It came with the promise of convenience and the language of modernity. What it actually came with was high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated fat, and a snack drawer that never had to close. The habits that kept her slim cost nothing and required nothing. What replaced them cost billions every year and still isn't working. Before number 12, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Hit that button. Then let's go. Number 12. She never snacked. Not once. Between meals in a 1955 black household, the kitchen was not a place you went. You ate at breakfast, you ate at lunch, you ate at dinner. Between those 3 fixed points, hunger was not a problem that got solved with a handful of something from the pantry. It was evidence that dinner would taste good. This was not discipline. The snack food industry as it exists today was essentially non-existent. Doritos launched in 1966. The concept of individually packaged snack foods designed to be eaten between meals while sitting on a couch had not been invented yet. There was nothing engineered to pull her back into the kitchen at 3 in the afternoon. So she didn't go. Research published in Cell Metabolism in 2019 found that eating within a defined window and stopping the pattern that was simply how a household ran in 1955 reduced total caloric intake and improved metabolic function without any restriction on what was eaten. The intermittent fasting industry is now worth over $6 billion a year. It sells at a monthly subscription price the eating window that was simply how a house worked when there was nothing on the shelf designed to break it. She didn't have a protocol. She had a kitchen that closed. Number 11. She cooked everything from scratch, and the cooking was the portion control. The Sunday chicken in a 1955 black kitchen came from the butcher. It required 45 minutes on its feet before it became dinner. The collard greens had to be washed, stripped, and simmered for an hour. The cornbread had to be mixed and baked. Every meal was labor before it was food, and that labor had a quiet effect on everything that followed. A study in public health nutrition found that people who cooked at home most frequently consumed significantly fewer calories per meal than those who relied on prepared food, not because they were disciplined, because home-cooked food is structurally less calorie dense than its commercial equivalent. Because nobody making cornbread from scratch for a family of 6 is going to spend 40 minutes on a second batch just because the first one tasted good. The effort was its own portion control. The meal kit delivery industry is now worth over $20 billion a year. The fast food industry feeds a third of the country every single day. Both arrived by replacing what she was doing in that kitchen, not with something better, but with something cheaper to manufacture and easier to sell. She spent 45 minutes making dinner. She ate a reasonable amount of it. The kitchen closed. She was done until morning. The math was that simple. Number 10. The food she ate was real food with real fat, and the fat was the point. She cooked in lard. She put real butter on her cornbread. She made her greens with a ham hock, and the fat that rendered into the pot liquor was not a flaw in the recipe, it was the recipe. She did not read a fat gram on any label because it did not occur to her to read one. The fat was the point. Full fat meant full. In 1977, the United States Senate told her fat was the problem. She switched. She threw out the lard and bought vegetable shortening. She reached for the products that said low fat on the label because the government had told her fat was killing her, and she had no reason not to believe it. What she did not know, what almost nobody would know for 40 more years, was that the scientific record underneath those guidelines had been arranged. In 2016, a paper published in JAMA Internal Medicine found internal documents revealing that in 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation paid Harvard scientists to publish a review in the New England Journal of Medicine, concluding that sugar's link to heart disease was limited and shifting blame onto fat. The funding was not disclosed. One of those scientists later helped draft the 1977 dietary guidelines she was following. The lard she threw out cost 40 cents. The processed shortening that replaced it came loaded with partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. The diet food industry that followed those guidelines is now worth over $250 billion a year. She was not following bad advice because she was naive. She was following advice that had been arranged for her. Number 9, she ate at the table every meal beginning to end. There was a table in her kitchen, and the family sat at it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Nobody ate standing at the counter. Nobody ate in front of the television. Nobody ate in the car because there was no food in the car. The meal had a beginning, a middle, and an end. When the plate was clean, the meal was over. Research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that eating while distracted increases caloric intake by an average of 25% at that meal and up to 60% at the next one, because distracted eating disrupts the brain's registration of fullness. The satiety signal arrives, but there is nowhere for it to land. Her table had no screen competing for her attention. The food got her full presence. Her body registered that it had eaten. The meal ended. The food delivery industry is now worth over $150 billion a year. It was built in significant part on removing the table from the equation, making it possible to eat anything alone at any time in front of whatever screen was nearest. She just had dinner at 6 o'clock with her family. That was the whole trick. Number 8, water and sweet tea. That was the table. There was water on her table. Sweet tea on Sundays, made with real sugar, shared across the whole family, a glass apiece. A Coca-Cola was a Friday night treat. The 6.5-ounce glass bottle, the only size they made, shared or savored slowly because it was not a daily fixture. In 1960, the average American consumed about 11 gallons of soft drinks per year. By 2000, that number had crossed 53 gallons. The gap is not explained by thirst. It is explained by an industry that invented delivery systems, larger bottles, drive-through fountain drinks, vending machines on every corner, and filled those systems with high fructose corn syrup that did not exist in the American food supply until 1971. The 6.5-ounce Coca-Cola contains about 80 calories. The 20-ounce bottle that replaced it contains 240. The 32-ounce gas station fountain cup contains over 350. Multiplied across every day of the year across a country, those numbers become the obesity epidemic. Not because anyone chose it, because the delivery system was built and the product was cheap, and the body did not have a defense against sweetness at that scale because the scale had never existed before. She drank water because water was what was on the table. It was not a wellness practice. It was just Tuesday. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. This channel exists to recover exactly this kind of history. The button is right there. Number 7. The body was never still and nobody called it exercise. A Black Woman's Day in 1955 was a physical day. If she worked outside the home, and most Black women did, in domestic service, in laundry, in factories, in the fields, she was on her feet for 8 hours doing labor that required her body to be present for it. When she came home, she cooked, cleaned, carried, and kept a household running by hand. Researchers who have studied the caloric expenditure of domestic labor in the 1950s and 60s estimate that women burned approximately 850 calories a day through housework alone. That is the equivalent of running 5 miles every single day without once thinking of it as fitness. She did not have a gym membership. She had a neighborhood and a household and distances that needed covering on foot. The global fitness industry is now worth over $96 billion a year. It sells at a monthly fee the movement that she performed twice over as a condition of daily life. She called it Tuesday. Number 6. Soul food was not the problem. What replaced soul food was collard greens are among the most nutrient-dense vegetables that exist. A cooked cup contains vitamins K, A, and C, significant folate, calcium, fiber, and antioxidants with documented anti-cancer properties. Black-eyed peas are plant protein and fiber. Sweet potatoes are beta-carotene and potassium. Beans and rice together form a complete protein. The cornbread was cornmeal and buttermilk baked in a cast iron skillet. None of these are health threats. All of them require preparation and produce satiety that lasts. Starting in the late 1970s and accelerating through the 1980s, processed food manufacturers targeted Black urban neighborhoods with marketing campaigns documented in internal research from that era. The food that arrived was sodium-dense, sugar-added, and engineered. The macaroni from a blue box instead of a pot of whole milk and real cheese. The greens from a can instead of fresh cooked low and slow. The chicken from a drive-thru instead of a cast iron skillet. Soul food did not produce the health outcomes now blamed on it. The processed industrial version of soul food, marketed aggressively into Black communities by an industry that understood exactly what it was doing, produced those outcomes. The cuisine was not the problem. What replaced the cuisine was the problem. Number 5. Nothing went to waste, and the leftovers were already planned for. The bones from Sunday's chicken became Tuesday's pot of greens or the base for a soup that stretched the week's groceries further than the original meal did. The pot liquor from the greens became a meal on its own with a piece of cornbread torn into it. Vegetable trimmings went into the next day's stock. This was not virtue. It was the natural consequence of a kitchen where wasting food felt like a sin because money was tight and the next paycheck was a week away. What this habit produced, almost by accident, was a household that consumed collagen, minerals, and slow-release nutrients from every part of the food it bought, instead of the muscle meat alone. Bone broth, the exact liquid produced by boiling those Sunday chicken bones with an onion and a bay leaf, is now sold at health food stores for $6 a carton, marketed as a wellness breakthrough. She made it from what she would have otherwise thrown away, and she did not call it anything. It was just what you did with the bones. Number 4. She trusted her hands more than she trusted a recipe card, and that meant she never overcooked a portion she didn't need. There was no measuring cup in most of these kitchens beyond what was needed for baking. A pot of rice was a handful per person, judged by eye, learned by repetition over years of cooking the same meals for the same number of people. This is a skill that has almost entirely disappeared, replaced by packaging that tells you the serving size and a culture that has stopped trusting anyone to know their own family's appetite without a label to consult. Eyeballed portions calibrated over years of practice are counterintuitively often more accurate than packaged serving sizes, which are set by food manufacturers based on what maximizes the appeal of the calorie count printed on the box, not on what an individual body actually needs. She knew how much rice fed her family because she had made rice for her family every week for a decade. That knowledge cannot be bought. It can only be practiced. Number 3. Sunday dinner was the anchor, and the rest of the week orbited around it. Sunday was the big meal, the chicken or the roast, the greens, the candied yams, the cornbread, the dessert if there was one. It took hours. It fed the family that day and supplied leftovers that stretched into Monday and sometimes Tuesday. The rest of the week's meals were smaller, simpler, built around what Sunday had produced. This rhythm meant that the richest, most caloric meal of the week happened once, not every day, and the days around it were lighter by comparison and partly composed of what Sunday had already paid for. The modern American eating pattern has no anchor. Every meal competes to be as satisfying as the last, and without a single big meal to orient around, every day tries to be Sunday. The result is a week with no light days at all. She had one big day and 6 moderate ones. The math worked because the big day was rare enough to be special, and the moderate days were genuinely moderate. Number 2, she did not believe a treat needed to happen every day to be worth having. Dessert in a 1955 Black household was not a daily entitlement. A pound cake on Sunday, a sweet potato pie for a holiday, tea cakes baked in batches that lasted the week. Ration out a few at a time rather than consumed all at once because the batch needed to last until the next baking day. Sugar was a special occasion ingredient, used with intention, not a default ending to every meal. This produced a relationship with sweetness that the modern food environment has specifically engineered against. When dessert is rare, it is satisfying in small amounts because the body and the palate have not been trained to expect it constantly. When dessert is available every single day in every form, the amount required to feel satisfied creeps upward, and what would have been a generous slice in 1955 becomes an unsatisfying taste today. She did not have less of a sweet tooth than we do. She had fewer opportunities to feed it, and that scarcity did the regulating that willpower is now expected to do alone. Number 1, she did not eat again after dinner. This is the one that held everything else together. Between dinner and breakfast was 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours. She did not eat. Not because she was disciplined, not because she had a protocol or a plan or a program with a name, because there was nothing in her kitchen engineered to pull her back into it. The pot liquor was for tomorrow's greens. The cornbread was for tomorrow's breakfast. The pantry held ingredients for next week's meals. Nothing sat on a shelf in a single serving package designed to disappear without counting. When the kitchen closed, it closed. The infrastructure made it automatic. Nobody needed willpower because nothing was engineered to defeat willpower. 21st century research on time-restricted eating has documented that the consistent overnight gap, the gap that was simply how a house worked in 1955, measurably stabilizes body weight without any change to what is eaten or how much. She was doing it every night. She didn't know she was doing it. It was just how the day ended. The diet industry spent 2026 charging people $60 a month for an app that tells them to stop eating at 8 o'clock. She stopped eating after dinner because that was when the kitchen closed. The kitchen closed because nothing had been built yet to require it to stay open. Look at those photographs again. The woman outside the grocery on 4th Avenue, the one on the stoop in the July heat, the one at the kitchen table with the stove already warm. She did not have a program. She did not have a plan. She did not subscribe to anything or count anything or track anything. She had a table and a kitchen that closed and food that was real and a body that moved all day and a block she walked to get wherever she was going. None of it cost more than the groceries. None of it required believing that the problem was her body. Before this knowledge disappears completely, I want you to have all of it in one place. Every beauty ritual, every health practice, every style standard, every piece of forgotten wisdom from the 1950s and 1960s that I have recovered on this channel is documented in the description below. What changed between her kitchen and ours was not what the human body needs. Those requirements have not changed. What changed was who got paid when those requirements were replaced with something they could manufacture and sell. Pick one thing from this list. Come back in the comments in a week and tell me what it did. The next video is ready. Her name was Evelyn. In the summer of 1963, she left the house in Atlanta at 6 in the morning. She walked 4 blocks to catch the bus that took her across town to the house where she cooked, cleaned, and cared for another family's children from 7 until 4. She walked home the same 4 blocks. She made dinner from scratch for her own family. She washed the dishes by hand. She hung the laundry on the line before she slept. She did not own a gym membership. She had never heard the word cardio. She did not count a single calorie, own a food journal, or follow any program with a name. She was 38 years old. She wore a size 10. Nobody in Evelyn's world was trying to stay slim. Nobody had a weight loss goal written on a vision board. The women on her block ate greens cooked in pot liquor with a ham hock. They made cornbread in cast iron. They fried chicken on Sundays and ate it at a table with 6 people and no leftovers. They ate food that the wellness industry would later call heavy, fattening, the reason Black women are unhealthy. They were not heavy. The story of why gets told wrong almost every time it gets told. It gets told as a story about what Black women didn't eat. It is actually a story about how they lived, what they cooked, when they ate, and what the food industry quietly did to a cuisine that had been working for generations before anyone thought to replace it. Before number 6, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Hit that button, then let's go. Number 6. The body was never still. Evelyn's day was not a day of exercise. It was a day of work. In 1965, the majority of Black women employed outside the home were doing domestic labor, cleaning, cooking, carrying, laundering, lifting, for wages that in the Deep South could be as low as $20 a week. Inside their own homes, they did the same labor again. Researchers at the University of South Carolina calculated that housework in the 1960s burned approximately 850 calories per day for women, not from a workout, from wringing out wet laundry, scrubbing floors on hands and knees, carrying groceries 4 blocks from the market, standing over a stove for 2 hours at the end of a day that had already been 8 hours long. The global fitness industry is now worth over $96 billion a year. It sells at a monthly fee the movement that Evelyn performed twice over every single day as a condition of survival. She didn't call it exercise. She called it Tuesday. Number 5. The kitchen closed after dinner every night. When Evelyn's family finished eating, the kitchen closed. The food went away. The dishes got washed. The stove went cold. Nobody came back for something crunchy at 9 o'clock because there was nothing engineered to pull them back. The pantry held flour, cornmeal, dried beans, and whatever produce came in that week. None of it was designed to be eaten out of a bag while sitting in front of a television. Research published in Cell Metabolism in 2019 found that consistent meal timing, eating within a defined window, and stopping reduced total caloric intake and improved metabolic function without any restriction on what was eaten. The body optimizes around predictability. It needs the gap between the last meal of the day and the first meal of tomorrow to regulate blood sugar, process what was eaten, and reset. Evelyn's kitchen closed at 8. Her body got that gap every night without anyone calling it intermittent fasting. The intermittent fasting industry is now worth over $6 billion a year. She never bought a single product from it. She just put the food away and went to bed. Number 4, soul food was not the problem. What replaced it was. This is the part that needs to be said plainly because it has been said wrong for 50 years. The original soul food that Evelyn cooked was not the cuisine that gets blamed for Black health outcomes today. It was not the same food. A pot of collard greens simmered low with a smoked ham hock for 3 hours is not a health threat. Collard greens are among the most nutrient-dense vegetables that exist. A single cooked cup contains vitamins K, A, and C, significant folate, calcium, fiber, and antioxidants with documented anti-cancer properties. The pot liquor, the dark liquid left in the pot after the greens are cooked, is rich in iron and folate. Black women had been drinking it as a tonic for generations before anyone in a laboratory confirmed what it contained. Black-eyed peas are plant protein and fiber. Sweet potatoes are beta-carotene and potassium. Beans and rice together form a complete protein without a gram of processed ingredient. The cornbread was made from cornmeal and buttermilk and cooked in a cast iron skillet. These were not convenience foods. They were slow foods. They required time and attention, and a body that knew what it was doing. The shift happened in the 1970s and 1980s. Processed food manufacturers began targeting Black neighborhoods specifically. Marketing research from that era documented that companies, including major fast food chains and packaged food brands, concentrated their advertising campaigns in Black urban communities, knowing that economic pressure and limited access to fresh food markets made processed, shelf-stable, cheap food the practical choice. The food that replaced what Evelyn cooked was not soul food. It was sodium-dense, sugar-added, nutrient-depleted, engineered food that looked like the original and did the opposite. The macaroni that came from a blue box instead of a pot of whole milk and real cheese. The greens from a can with added salt instead of fresh cooked in a pot with vegetables. The chicken from a drive-thru instead of a cast iron skillet with the bones still in. Soul food did not make Black women heavy. The processed version of soul food, marketed aggressively into Black communities by an industry that understood exactly who it was selling to, did. Number 3, they ate one plate and they ate it at the table. Sunday dinner in Evelyn's house meant everyone sat down at the same time. There was one plate of food. The portions were what they were because the pot held what it held, and there were 6 people at the table. Nobody had a second portion because there was none to be had. Nobody ate standing at the counter. Nobody ate in front of the television. This is not a small thing. Research from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that eating while distracted, watching television, looking at a phone, eating while walking or driving increases caloric intake by an average of 25% in that sitting and by as much as 60% at the next meal, because distracted eating disrupts the brain's registration of satiety. The fullness signal arrives but has nowhere to land. Evelyn's table had a beginning and an end. When the plate was clean, the meal was finished. Nobody asked whether that was enough because the question hadn't been invented yet. The plate was full. The plate had always been enough. The food delivery industry in America is now worth over $150 billion a year. It was built in significant part on removing the table from the equation, making it possible to eat anything, anytime, alone in front of whatever screen was nearest. The table was not just furniture. It was portion control that required no counting and no willpower. Evelyn just called it dinner. Number 2, she drank water. That was it. There was water on Evelyn's table, sometimes sweet tea on a Sunday, made with real cane sugar in a glass, shared across 6 people, sometimes lemonade from actual lemons in the summer. A Coca-Cola, the 6.5-ounce glass bottle, was a treat at the end of the week, not a daily fixture. In 1960, the average American consumed about 11 gallons of soft drinks per year. By 2000, That number had crossed 53 gallons. The gap between those two numbers is not explained by thirst. It is explained by an industry that created new delivery systems, larger bottles, drive-through fountain drinks, vending machines on every corner, 2-liter bottles priced cheaper than juice, and then filled those systems with high fructose corn syrup, which was not in the American food supply at all until the early 1970s. The 6.5-ounce Coca-Cola Evelyn drank on a Friday night contains about 80 calories. The 20-ounce bottle that replaced it contains 240. The 32-ounce gas station fountain cup contains over 350. The math runs across every single day of the year. Evelyn drank water because water was what was in the house. It was not a wellness choice. It was just the table, number one. She never believed the food her grandmother taught her was the problem. This is the one. There was a moment, and it came fast, somewhere in the late 1970s and into the 1980s, when the American public health conversation turned toward Black women's bodies and said, "The way you have always eaten is why you are unhealthy. The greens, the beans, the cornbread, the soul food, that is the problem." The women who heard this message did not recognize themselves in it. Evelyn had been cooking her mother's recipes her entire adult life, and her body had held steady. But the conversation was loud, and the packaging was convincing, and the alternatives were cheap. And one by one, the old habits began to give way to what the industry was selling. She bought the low-fat margarine instead of the lard. She bought the boxed mac instead of making it from scratch. She bought the canned greens instead of the fresh ones, because by the 1980s, the fresh ones cost more, and the store that sold them had moved further away. The food dessert did not appear by accident. The grocery stores that stock real produce moved out of Black neighborhoods at exactly the same rate that fast food and convenience stores moved in. That movement has been documented by urban planning researchers across dozens of American cities. What replaced Evelyn's kitchen was not a better version of what she had. It was a cheaper version, designed for someone else's profit, marketed to her as progress. She stayed slim in 1963 because her body was moving all day and her kitchen closed at night, and she cooked real food from a cuisine that had been nutritionally sophisticated for generations before anyone called it that. She did not have a program. She did not have a plan. She had a cast iron skillet and a pot of collard greens on the stove and 6 people coming home for dinner. Evelyn passed in 1991 at 66. Her daughter found her cast iron skillet still hanging on the kitchen wall. She still uses it. The skillet weighs 7 pounds. It is the oldest thing in the kitchen. Everything around it has been replaced several times. It has not been replaced once. Pick one thing from this list and put it back. Come back in the comments and tell me what you changed. The next video is ready. Look at any photograph from a Black neighborhood in July of 1955. A church picnic in Birmingham. A backyard cookout in Memphis. A block party in Chicago in the middle of an August heat wave. The women are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. The kitchens have been hot all day. The temperature outside has been climbing past 90 degrees since noon. And not one of these women is heavy. A modern summer for a modern Black woman often goes the opposite direction. The heat triggers food cravings, restaurant takeout, sugary drinks pulled from a gas station cooler, late night ice cream, because the kitchen has felt unmanageable since June. That was not the experience of the women in those photographs. Summer was a season they actually thrived in. Not because they were trying, but because the way Black households ran in summer in 1955 was built around a set of habits so specific to the heat that the season itself became one of the leanest months of the year. The kitchen rhythm changed, the food changed, the drinks changed, and what the body did in response changed with it. This is what they knew. Number 8, the garden was the grocery list, and the garden in July was almost entirely vegetables. A black household in 1955, particularly in the South but increasingly in the Great Migration cities of the Midwest, had a garden. Sometimes a full backyard plot, sometimes a few rows along the side of the house. By July, that garden was producing in volume tomatoes, okra, squash, peppers, greens, cucumbers. Beans, what grew was what got eaten, because produce coming out of the garden in July had to be used within days, and there was always more on the way. The result was a summer diet dominated by fresh vegetables, not as a deliberate dietary choice, but as a logistical necessity. The vegetables were free or close to it. The meat got stretched further because the vegetables filled the plates. Caloric density dropped naturally across the entire summer without anyone planning a single thing. The body responded the way bodies respond to a sudden increase in fiber and water content and a decrease in processed carbohydrates. It lightened. Before number 7, I want you to have all of this in one place. Every piece of forgotten wisdom I have recovered is documented in the description below. Number 7. Cold soups and gazpacho-style raw vegetable plates replaced hot meals in the heat of the day. In summer, the noon meal in many black households shifted away from the heavy braises and long simmered pots of the rest of the year. Lunch became a plate of sliced tomatoes with onion and a little vinegar, a bowl of cold cucumber and buttermilk soup, cold rice salad with whatever vegetables were ripe, a slice of cornbread from breakfast eaten cold with a piece of cheese. These meals were not deliberately low-calorie. They were practical responses to the heat. Nobody wanted to stand over a hot stove at noon in August. But the consequence was a midday meal that was lighter, more hydrating, and lower in caloric density than the equivalent meal in January would have been. The body, working hard to regulate temperature in the heat, was getting fuel that supported that work instead of fuel that competed with it. Number 6. Watermelon was lunch, sometimes the whole lunch. In July and August, watermelon arrived in volume, from gardens, from roadside stands, from neighbors who had grown too much. And in many black households, a slice of cold watermelon with a piece of cornbread or a hard-boiled egg was a complete summer lunch. Not a snack, not a dessert, a meal. Watermelon is approximately 92% water, contains lycopene and citrulline, both documented to have positive cardiovascular effects, and produces strong satiety despite its low caloric density. The water content keeps the body hydrated. The fiber slows the natural sugar release. The cold temperature itself signals satiety to the brain. The modern black diet has largely lost watermelon as a meal and retained it only as a sweet side dish. The shift was driven partly by racial stereotyping that made the fruit culturally awkward to display in mixed company, and partly by the simple disappearance of the home garden where it had grown. Both losses meant something practical was gone. Number 5. Iced tea, unsweetened or lightly sweetened, was the all-day drink. In 1955, a pitcher of iced tea sat in the icebox or on the porch for the entire day in summer. It was brewed in the morning, sweetened lightly with sugar, much less than modern Southern sweet tea or sometimes not sweetened at all, and consumed in glasses throughout the day in place of water for the people who found water boring and in place of soda for everyone. The unsweetened or lightly sweetened iced tea hydrated, provided a small caffeine boost that supported the energy needed to keep working through the heat, and occupied the place that sugary drinks now occupy in the modern summer. The constant sipping that, in modern form, delivers 200 to 300 calories of pure sugar between meals without registering as eating. A 12-ounce can of soda contains 39 grams of sugar. A 12-ounce glass of iced tea with 2 teaspoons of sugar contains 8. Across an entire summer of constant sipping, that difference accumulates into pounds. Number 4. The big meal moved to early evening or after sunset. The schedule of eating changed in summer. The main meal of the day in many Black households moved from the middle of the day to early evening or even after sunset, once the heat had broken and cooking was tolerable again. This was practical. It kept the kitchen cool during the hottest hours, but it also produced a natural eating window that aligned the heaviest food intake with the lowest physical activity period of the day. The 1955 summer pattern compressed eating into a roughly 6-hour window, often from late afternoon through early evening, with very little eating after dark. The overnight fasting window stretched from sunset to mid-morning, 14, sometimes 15 hours of no food. Modern research on time-restricted eating consistently identifies this kind of pattern as producing measurable improvements in metabolic function without any change to what is eaten. The 1955 summer schedule was doing this naturally, dictated by the weather rather than a protocol. Number 3, the body was in motion all day, and the motion produced its own appetite regulation. A Black woman's summer day in 1955 was a physical day. The garden needed tending in the early morning before the heat. The laundry got hung outside. The children got chased through the yard and brought back. Walking to the grocery store and back was a real expedition with bags carried by hand for blocks. There was no air-conditioned chair to sit in. There was no glowing screen to sit in front of for hours. The continuous low-level movement of a summer day in this era, combined with the heat, which itself increases caloric expenditure as the body works to thermoregulate, produced a baseline daily energy burn that no modern sedentary summer day comes close to. The body that has been active all day does not crave the same things at 6 in the evening that the body that has been sitting all day craves. Number 2. Fermented and preserved vegetables were on the table at every meal. In summer, the canning and preserving from the previous year was being eaten down, and the new season's preserving was being started. The table had pickled okra, watermelon rind pickles, hot pepper sauce on every plate, chow chow, pickled green tomatoes, sometimes a small jar of homemade sauerkraut from the cellar. These were not garnishes. They were eaten in real amounts, alongside whatever else was on the plate. The lactic acid bacteria in properly fermented vegetables, the kind made at home in salt brine, not the kind preserved in vinegar in commercial jars, colonize the gut and produce compounds that improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and contribute to the satiety signaling that tells the brain when the body has had enough. The probiotic supplement industry now sells these same organisms in capsule form for $30 to $50 a bottle. She had them in a jar in the icebox for almost nothing. Before number 1, subscribe. This channel exists to recover exactly this. Hit that button. Then let's go. Number 1. The heat itself was treated as something to work with, not something to escape. This is the one that held the whole summer system together. A Black woman in 1955 did not fight the heat by trying to recreate winter conditions inside the house. There was no air conditioning in most households. The windows were open to catch the breeze. The cooking was scheduled around the hottest hours. The body was allowed to sweat and to thermoregulate naturally, and the eating adjusted around all of it. Lighter at midday, heavier at dusk, hydrating throughout. What this produced almost as a side effect was a body that worked with the season instead of against it. The heat raised the baseline caloric burn. The thermoregulation kept the metabolism active. The lighter meals during the hottest hours kept the digestive load low when the body was working hardest to stay cool. The modern Black summer, lived in a chilled apartment with food delivered by app, has lost almost every one of these adjustments. The body never has to thermoregulate. The day involves almost no physical work. The food is the same in July as it was in January. The weight that summer used to take off, summer now puts on. The women in those photographs from July 1955 are not slim because of willpower. They are slim because the way they lived in summer made being heavy nearly impossible. Pick one thing from this list. Try it this week. Come back in the comments and tell me what changed. The next video is ready. Her alarm goes off at 6, and by the time the sun is fully up, she has already done 4 things that kept her waist the same size at 50 that it was at 20. She isn't thinking about any of them. She's just moving through a morning she's had 10,000 times. No scale by the bed, no app, no powder in a shaker bottle. No word for any of it. You wake up, reach for your phone, skip breakfast or grab something sweet on the way out the door, sit down for the next 9 hours, and wonder why the weight settles around your middle and won't leave no matter what you try. She never fought the belly. It simply never arrived because the first 2 hours of her day were quietly doing the work that no supplement, no cleanse, and no fat burner you can buy has ever managed to do since. Nobody taught you what she knew about mornings. Not because it was a secret, because the women who knew it stopped being asked, and what they knew could not be bottled. So it was allowed to disappear, and something you had to buy every month was sold to you in its place. 12 morning habits. Ordinary in her house, ordinary on the whole street. Every one of them kept the weight off the middle, where it's hardest to lose and most dangerous to carry. Every one cost nothing, and every single one was replaced. Not with something better, but with something that made money. Number 1 is not a food and not a pill. It is the one thing about her morning that made every other habit on this list work, and it's the one the whole diet industry needs you to forget. Stay to the end for that one. Before number 12, subscribe. This channel exists to put this knowledge back in the hands it was taken from. Hit that button. Then let's go. Number 12. She ate a real breakfast and it held her until noon. 2 eggs cracked into a hot pan with a little butter. Toast. Maybe a piece of bacon. Coffee. It took 8 minutes and it was made of actual food. And here is the thing it did that changed her whole day. It kept her full for 4 or 5 hours without a single thought of eating again. Whole food protein and fat in the morning produce a strong, steady satiety signal. The message to the brain that the body has what it needs. That signal is what stops the mid-morning hunger that sends everyone else to the vending machine. And crucially, that kind of breakfast barely moves your blood sugar, so there's no spike and no crash. And no crash means no craving. Steady. Blood sugar is one of the single biggest factors in whether fat settles around the middle, because the hormone that spikes with sugar is the same one that tells your body to store fat right there at the waist. She wasn't skipping breakfast and she wasn't eating a sugary one. She was eating a real one, and it did the one job breakfast is supposed to do. It held her calm and full all the way to lunch. Number 11, black coffee, 2 calories, and that was the whole cup. The percolator went on first thing and she drank it black or with a little real cream. 2 calories. No syrup, no whipped anything, no sugar stirred in by the spoonful. Just coffee. The way it had been for 100 years. Black coffee in the morning does real work. The caffeine gives a modest, genuine bump to metabolism and gently blunts appetite, which is exactly why it fits so naturally into a morning that wasn't reaching for food. It cost nothing and added nothing to the day, but a little warmth and a little lift. The drink they replaced it with wears the word coffee on the label and carries as many calories as a full meal, sugar and cream and syrup engineered into a dessert you drink before you've even had breakfast. The global coffee drink business is worth a fortune, and every dollar of it is built on the gap between what coffee is and what they turned it into. She drank the 2-calorie version every morning of her life and never once thought of it as a diet. Number 10, a glass of water before anything else. Before the coffee, before the stove, a glass of water at the sink. Plain room temperature. Sometimes with a squeeze of lemon. It was just what you did to start the day. Overnight, the body runs dry, and first thing hydration does two quiet things. It gets the digestion moving, and it corrects the thirst that the brain constantly mistakes for hunger. So much of what feels like morning appetite is really just a body asking for water. A woman who drank her water first wasn't fooled into eating when she only needed a glass of water. They sell electrolyte powders and morning metabolism drinks now in little packets at $1 a piece. She turned the tap. It was free, and it worked. And she never ran out. Number 9, she was on her feet and moving from the moment she got up. There was no such thing as sitting through the morning. She was up, making beds, hanging laundry, sweeping, carrying, walking to the market, and back with everything in her arms. The word exercise meant something soldiers did. For her, it had no category because movement wasn't a thing you scheduled. It was just the shape of the morning. This is the quiet giant of the whole list. All that ordinary, unscheduled movement, researchers call it non-exercise activity, and it accounts for an enormous swing in how many calories a body burns in a day, hundreds and hundreds of them, all before anyone would call it a workout. And a body that keeps moving through the morning keeps its blood sugar low and steady, which is exactly the condition under which the belly doesn't fill in. She burned through her morning on her feet, carrying and walking and working, and the fitness industry now sells back to her granddaughter at a monthly fee the exact movement she got for free before breakfast. Number 8. Up with the sun and out in the light. She rose early, and the morning light hit her eyes at the window, at the clothesline, on the walk to the market. She wasn't in a dim room lit by a screen. She was in the daylight early, every day. Morning light does something people are only now paying attention to. It sets the body's internal clock, which governs the daily rhythm of the very hormones that decide when you're hungry, how well you sleep, and where your body stores fat. Early light lowers the stress hormone at the right time of day, and that stress hormone, when it runs high, is one of the most direct drivers of fat landing, specifically around the middle. She didn't know the word cortisol. She just got up with the sun and went about her day in the light, the way people had for all of time, and her body kept its rhythm because she never broke it. Number 7, no sugar in the morning, not in the cup, not on the plate. Her breakfast was savory. Eggs, toast, coffee. There was no bowl of sweetened cereal, no pastry, no flavored yogurt, no sugar, frosted, anything. Sweet things were for after supper, once in a while, not for the start of the day. Here's why that mattered more than almost anything. A sugary breakfast spikes your blood sugar within the hour, and the crash that follows arrives mid-morning as a sharp, specific craving for more sugar. And that spike and crash cycle, repeated every single morning, is one of the most reliable ways ever discovered to build fat around the waist. She started every day off that roller coaster entirely, on steady ground, so the cravings never came and the storing never started. The cereal aisle is a wall of sugar sold as breakfast, most of it aimed at exactly the meal she kept savory. She ate her eggs, her blood sugar stayed level, and the mid-morning hunger that runs everyone else's day never touched hers. If your mornings have been fighting you, and there's a woman in your life fighting the same fight, a mother, a sister, a friend who's tried everything and can't shift the middle, hit the like button right now. 1 second. It puts this video in front of her. She needs this more than she knows. Then stay, because number 1 is the habit that made every other one on this list work. Number 6. Real fat at breakfast, and she wasn't afraid of it. Butter in the pan, real cream in the coffee. Whole milk, not skim. The fat was not the enemy in her kitchen. It was the point, because she understood, without being told, that fat is what makes a meal hold you. Fat slows everything down. It slows the rise of blood sugar from whatever you eat beside it. So there's no spike, no crash, no 10 o'clock hunger. It sends its own powerful fullness signal to the brain. A breakfast with real fat in it is a breakfast you don't think about again for hours. When the guidelines later told everyone to strip the fat out, the food that replaced it had to add sugar to taste like anything, and people traded the thing that kept them full for the thing that made them hungrier. That trade is written on waistlines to this day. She kept the butter and kept the cream, and she was full and steady all morning long. The fat was never what put the weight on the middle. Removing it and replacing it with sugar is what did. Number 5, she never snacked between waking and lunch. Between breakfast and the noon meal, the kitchen was closed. Not by willpower, by habit so complete she never thought about it. Hunger before lunch wasn't a problem to solve with a handful of something. It was just the normal feeling of a body between meals, and it meant lunch would taste good. Constant grazing keeps the fat storage hormone switched on all morning long, and a body that's always a little bit digesting is a body that's always a little bit storing. The long, clean stretch between a real breakfast and lunch, with nothing in between, gives the body the gap it needs to actually burn instead of store. That gap is where the middle stays flat. The entire snack industry was invented to fill exactly that gap, to convince a body that felt fine that it needed something at 10 in the morning. She never had the product, so she never had the problem. Breakfast, then nothing, then lunch. Her mornings had 2 meals and no in between, and that empty stretch did more for her waist than any snack ever could. Number 4, breakfast came at the same time every single day, 7 o'clock or whenever the household ran, but the same time daily, without fail. The body knew when food was coming because it always came at the same hour. Consistent meal timing lets the body settle into a rhythm, and a body in rhythm handles food better, steadier blood sugar, steadier hunger, steadier energy. When breakfast lands at a different time every day, or gets skipped, or slides to 11 on the weekend, the whole system loses its footing, and the hunger and the storing both get harder to control. The meal replacement shakes and the erratic modern schedule both fight against this without anyone noticing. She just ate at the same time every day, the way you'd wind a clock, and her body kept perfect time. Number 3, she started the morning calm, not frantic. Her morning had a shape and a pace. Up, water, coffee on, breakfast made. The day begun, steady, familiar, unhurried in its own way. She was not waking to a screen full of alarm and scrolling herself into a state of low panic before her feet hit the floor. This matters more than it sounds. A frantic, stressed morning floods the body with the stress hormone at the worst possible time, and that hormone, running high day after day, tells the body to hold fat around the middle and to reach for sugar to cope. A calm morning keeps that hormone low, and a body that isn't marinating in stress. First thing is a body that isn't being told to store. They sell stress cortisol supplements now. Belly fat pills built entirely on this connection. She got the same effect from a morning that simply wasn't a race. Calm was free. It still is. Number 2, the long overnight gap, dinner to breakfast, and nothing between. She finished supper in the early evening and ate nothing again until breakfast the next morning. Not as a rule she was following. There was simply nothing in the house engineered to pull her back into the kitchen at 9 at night. So the hours between dinner and breakfast were long, and they were empty, and they were the same every day. That long overnight stretch is when the body finally gets to do its repair and it's burning uninterrupted, without new food constantly arriving. It's one of the most natural and gentle patterns there is, and she lived it without effort simply because late night eating hadn't been invented yet. The body that gets a real break overnight wakes up ready, steady, and lean in a way the body that grazes until midnight never does. The late night snack, the midnight drive-through, the something in front of the television, all of it arrived later, and all of it closed that healing gap. Her evenings ended, her kitchen went quiet, and her body got the long, calm night it was built for. When I started pulling this together, I expected to find that these women simply had faster metabolisms, that it was youth or genes or luck. That is not what the record shows. What the record shows is a morning, repeated every day, that had not yet been broken apart and sold back in pieces. Not one habit on this list required a supplement, a subscription, or anything with a laboratory on the label. Several of them are the opposite of restriction. She ate a full, real, satisfying breakfast. What they required was a rhythm handed down and kept morning after morning. And here is the part that matters most. Every habit on this list kept her blood sugar steady, her stress low, and her body moving and fed. The exact 3 conditions under which the body does not pack fat around the middle. The industry did not sell you those conditions. It sold you the sugary breakfast that breaks the first one, the frantic sedentary morning that breaks the second, and then it sold you the pills and powders to fix a problem its own products created. They didn't sell you a flat stomach. They sold you the belly, and then they sold you the cure. Number 1 is where that lands hardest. Number 1, the morning was a pattern, the same one every single day. This is not a food and not a trick. It is the thread that ran through every other habit on this list. She did the same things in the same order every morning of her adult life. Water, coffee, a real breakfast at the same hour, up and moving in the early light, nothing between meals. The kitchen closed until noon. Not because she was disciplined in the way we're taught to think of discipline, but because it was simply her morning, worn smooth by repetition until it took no effort at all. And a body given the same steady signal every single day settles into a rhythm that quietly holds the weight where it belongs. It is not the one perfect breakfast that keeps the middle flat. It is the same good enough breakfast, eaten the same way, 10,000 mornings in a row. That is the thing that was taken. Not the eggs, not the coffee. You can still buy those. The pattern. The unbroken rhythm of a morning that repeated itself for decades, handed down from her mother's kitchen to hers. A whole way of starting the day that asked for consistency instead of willpower. The industry stepped into that morning and said, "You don't need her steady rhythm. You need our new product," and the rhythm broke, and the sugary breakfast and the frantic scroll and the midnight snack poured into the space where it used to be. That woman grew old with the same waist she had carried her whole life. And when her daughter thought back on her, she didn't remember a diet because there had never been one. She remembered a morning. The smell of coffee and eggs at the same hour every day. Her mother up with the sun, moving, coming already halfway through a morning that had kept her exactly herself for 50 years. The 12 habits that kept the weight off her middle cost. Nothing across a whole year, less than 1 month of the pills they'll sell you now. None required a subscription. None required a powder or a number to count. None required believing that your body, left to a steady and well-fed rhythm, was ever the problem. What changed between her morning and yours was not what the body needs. That has not changed. What changed was who got paid when the rhythm broke. So pick up one thread, Choose one habit from this list: the real breakfast, the glass of water, the morning walk, the closed kitchen, and do it the same way every morning for the next month. Then come back to the comments and tell me what changed. And tell me one more thing down there while you're at it. Which of these did your mother or your grandmother actually do? Whose morning do you still remember? I read every single comment. The next video is ready. I'll see you there. Her name was Hattie. In the winter of 1953 in Jackson, Mississippi, she woke at 5 in the morning to find her youngest running a fever. The child's forehead was hot and dry, her breathing shallow. Hattie did not call a doctor, not because she didn't want to, because the nearest hospital that would take her child was 40 miles away. And even then, only in the basement ward. The waiting room upstairs was not for people who looked like Hattie. That was the law. So she went to the kitchen. She put a pot of water on the stove, dropped in 4 cloves of garlic braided by the window, added a thumb of ginger root, a spoonful of raw honey, 2 halves of a lemon, brought it to a low simmer, carried a bowl of it back to her daughter's room, and stayed there. By morning, the fever had broken. By afternoon, the child was asking for food. Hattie did not think of what she had done as medicine. She thought of it as what her mother had shown her in that same kitchen 20 years earlier, which was what her mother's mother had shown her before that. In a kitchen, in a different state, in a different century, under conditions so brutal that every piece of knowledge you carried out of them was an act of survival. She did not call it folk medicine. She did not call it anything. It was just what you did when the kitchen was where the medicine lived. Before number 7, subscribe. This is exactly what this channel is here to make. Hit that button, then let's go. The reason Black grandmothers in the 1950s knew how to heal from the kitchen was not entirely by choice. In 1953, across the American South, Black Americans were refused admission to white hospitals, or admitted only to segregated wards and basements, under-resourced and deliberately removed from the main facility. The American Medical Association barred Black doctors from membership for over a century. In much of the rural South, there was no nearby doctor who would see a Black patient at all. This was not a gap in the system. It was the system. What Black women did in response was necessity built into knowledge, carried across generations until it became something more than survival. It became craft, a library of remedies that worked, not because anyone had studied them in a laboratory, but because generations of women had studied them on the people they loved with real stakes. The pharmaceutical industry is now worth over $1.6 trillion a year. None of the compounds in Hattie's pot that morning are patentable. Research follows money. Money follows patents. The medicine in Hattie's kitchen was never studied the way it should have been, because no one could own it. The science has since confirmed most of it anyway. Number 7, garlic was in everything, and it was always raw. In Hattie's kitchen, garlic was not a flavoring. It was a fixture. A braid of it hung by the window. Cloves went into the pot at the first sign of anything. A cough starting at the back of the throat. A child who came home from school too quiet. She used it crushed, never sliced, because crushing is what triggers the enzymatic reaction that produces allicin, the compound responsible for most of garlic's medicinal activity. She did not know the word allicin. She just knew that bruised garlic did more than slice garlic, and that her mother had always done it this way. Research published in peer-reviewed studies found that allicin exhibits broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity against bacteria, including strains resistant to pharmaceutical antibiotics. A clinical study found daily allicin supplementation significantly reduced common cold infections in adults over 12 weeks with no side effects. The global cold and flu remedy market is worth over $5 billion a year. Most of it is built around compounds that do approximately what a lichen does, at a margin that a braid of garlic hanging in a kitchen window cannot support. She didn't buy the product. She grew what became the product. The difference was who got paid. Number 6, elderberry before anyone called it a superfood. In Hattie's County, elderberry grew along fence lines and creek beds. Every woman on her road knew where the best bushes were. In late summer, they harvested the clusters of deep blue-black berries, boiled them down with raw honey, and poured the syrup into small glass jars that lined the kitchen shelf through fall and winter. 1 teaspoon when a cold was coming. 1 teaspoon every morning when it was going around the school. Formerly enslaved African Americans interviewed in the Federal Writers Project in the 1930s recalled elderberry as one of the most important preventive remedies they knew. The knowledge was that old. In 2019, researchers at the University of Sydney found that compounds from elderberries directly inhibit influenza virus entry and replication in human cells and stimulate the immune system's cytokine response. They noted elderberry was effective at multiple stages of the viral cycle simultaneously. Significant because blocking a virus at several points has a measurably higher chance of stopping it. A 2021 systematic review of 5 randomized controlled trials concluded elderberry may reduce the duration and severity of influenza symptoms. Hattie's mother's mother had reached the same conclusion somewhere around 1890. The global elderberry supplement market is now worth over $1.5 billion a year. The syrup in those kitchen jars cost the price of the honey. The knowledge cost nothing because no one had ever found a way to take it. Number 5, the ginger root that never left the windowsill. There was always a ginger root in Hattie's kitchen. It went into tonic water for stomach sickness, into hot water with lemon when a child woke in the night unable to settle. She grated it directly into boiling water, strained it through a cloth, added honey. Watch the child drink it slowly. Watch the stomach calm. Ginger's active compounds, gingerols and shoggols, have been confirmed in clinical research for decades. A randomized controlled trial published in Anesthesiology found ginger effective against nausea, comparable to standard pharmaceutical interventions. Research in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed ginger inhibits prostaglandin synthesis, the same mechanism targeted by ibuprofen, without the gastrointestinal side effects. The anti-nausea pharmaceutical market is worth over $6 billion a year. Ginger appears in it as an ingredient, marked up several thousand% from the raw root that cost Hattie a nickel at the market. She kept it on the windowsill. It lasted weeks. It worked every time. If you are finding value in this, subscribe now. This channel goes where the history actually is. Button is right there. Number 4, raw honey was never just a sweetener. The honey Hattie kept was not the squeezable plastic bear from the grocery shelf. It was raw, purchased from a neighbor who kept hives, amber and thick and slightly cloudy. It went into every tonic, and she put it on wounds. A clean cloth, a thin layer of honey pressed flat against a cut that was starting to look wrong. Raw honey has an acidity of between 3.2 and 4.5 on the pH scale. Acidic enough to inhibit the growth of most bacteria on contact. It also generates small amounts of hydrogen peroxide through the enzyme glucose oxidase, providing ongoing antibacterial activity as it sits against the wound. Medical-grade Manuka honey is now applied in hospitals across America, the UK, and Australia to chronic wounds, surgical sites, and burns. Research in the Journal of Clinical and Experimental Dermatology confirmed its antibacterial activity exceeds standard silver-based dressings for certain wound types. Medical-grade Manuka now sells for over $50 a clinical tube. Hattie's raw honey cost 49 cents a jar. She bought it from her neighbor. The mechanism is identical. The honey has not changed. What changed is who got to sell it. Number 3, bone broth from Sunday's chicken made on Monday's stove. In Hattie's house, nothing from the Sunday chicken was wasted. The carcass went into the pot Monday morning, covered with water, an onion, celery, a bay leaf, 2 cloves of garlic, low heat, all day until the liquid ran dark gold. That was dinner Monday night. And Tuesday's soup base. And what got carried in a cup to whoever in the house was fighting off something they couldn't name. Nobody called it bone broth. She called it stock, or she didn't call it anything. It was just what you did with the bones because wasting food was a sin and because the sick people got better. In 2000, Dr. Barbara Renard at the University of Nebraska Medical Center published a study in the journal Chest finding that chicken soup inhibited neutrophil chemotaxis. Neutrophils being the white blood cells responsible for the inflammation that causes upper respiratory symptoms. The broth made from a real carcass with vegetables measurably reduced the inflammatory response associated with colds. Each individual ingredient showed activity. The complete soup showed it most. That study was published in 2000. Hattie's mother had been publishing results in that kitchen since 1910. Bone broth now sells at $6 to $12 a carton at Whole Foods, labeled a wellness product. The bones in Hattie's pot cost nothing. They were what would have been thrown away. The bones were always free. What arrived 50 years later was the price tag. Number 2. Warm water, lemon, and apple cider vinegar every morning. Before Hattie ate anything in winter, she drank a glass of warm water with half a lemon and a spoonful of apple cider vinegar from the cabinet beside the stove. Tart enough to make her eyes water. She drank it in 2 pulls and started the coffee. Her mother had done it. Every woman she knew of a certain age did it. Nobody explained why. It was just what you did in the morning when you didn't have time to get sick. In 1958, Dr. D.C. Jarvis published A Folk Medicine, number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list. His central recommendation was the same morning tonic Hattie was already drinking before anyone handed him a book deal. Research published in Diabetes Care found that acetic acid, the active compound in apple cider vinegar, measurably improves insulin sensitivity when consumed before meals, blunting the blood glucose spike that follows eating. The global apple cider vinegar supplement market is now worth over $1.3 billion a year. The bottle Hattie bought cost 29 cents and lasted the winter. The price is the only thing that has been invented since 1953. Number 1. She knew the difference between sick and dying. This is the one nobody talks about. Hattie's grandmother had not been permitted to learn to read. What she had instead was observation accumulated over a lifetime and passed into her daughter's hands like a set of tools. How to tell a fever that would break on its own from one that would not. How to tell a cough that needed steam and garlic from one that needed a doctor, regardless of what the waiting room looked like. How to tell a stomach that needed ginger from a stomach that needed something she did not have. She knew the difference, and she taught it. The women who carried this knowledge were not practicing folk medicine in the way the medical establishment later used that phrase, dismissively, as though what happened in those kitchens was superstition waiting to be corrected by science. They were practicing medicine. With limited tools, under conditions with no margin for error, on the people who depended on them entirely because the official system had made itself unavailable. None of those compounds are patentable. None of those remedies can be owned, so the funding never arrived to study them properly until long after the knowledge had been dismissed as primitive. The science confirmed it anyway. The pharmaceutical industry earned $1.6 trillion last year. The medicine in Hattie's kitchen earned her nothing except a daughter who recovered from a fever in 1953, and grew up to teach her own daughter the same things in the same order. Hattie Wilson died in 1979 at 71. Her daughter kept the morning tonic written on an index card in the kitchen drawer. Her granddaughter found it in 2003 and thought it was something her grandmother had invented. She had not invented it. She had received it, the same way her grandmother had received it before her. In a kitchen with less and a need that was greater, and a knowledge that had survived every single thing that had tried to take it. Pick one thing from this list. Go to your kitchen right now and find what you already have. Come back in the comments and tell me what you found. The next video is ready. 1955. Step into her kitchen at 9 o'clock at night, after everyone's fed and the dishes are done. And here's what you see. Nothing. Bare counters wiped down to the wood. An empty sink. One cast iron skillet hanging on its nail, still warm. A dish towel folded over the oven handle. That's it. The whole room is quiet and clear and ready for morning. Now look at yours. The counter you can't see the surface of. The 3 drawers that won't shut because of the gadgets. The cabinet of plastic containers with no matching lids. The bins you bought to organize the stuff, stacked on top of more stuff. She ran a kitchen that fed a family of 6, 3 meals a day, every day. And it never looked like yours looks right now. Not because she had more space. She had less. Not because she was tidier by nature. Because she knew something you were never taught. Nobody handed it down to you. And it wasn't a secret. The women who knew it stopped being asked, and what they knew could not be sold. So it was allowed to disappear, and something was sold to you in its place. A whole industry, in fact, built on the exact problem she never had. 12 habits. Ordinary in that kitchen, ordinary on the whole street. Every one of them kept a small kitchen clear and calm. Everyone cost nothing, and several of them saved money. And every single one was replaced, not with something better, but with something you had to keep buying. Number 1 is not a product and not a container. It is the single rule that made every other habit on this list work. And it's the one the organizing industry most needs you to forget. Stay to the end for that one. Before number 12, subscribe. This channel exists to put this knowledge back in the hands it was taken from. Hit that button, then let's go. Number 12. The counters were bare every single night. Before she went to bed, everything came off the counter. Not most things. Everything. The bread went in the box, the sugar in its jar, the mail off the table, the last cup washed and put up. She wiped the surface down and the kitchen ended the day empty. This sounds like a small thing. It is the whole foundation. A cluttered kitchen is almost never one big mess. It is 100 small things that got set down and never picked back up, one at a time, until the surface disappeared. She never let the first one sit, so the 100th never got a chance to pile on top of it. A bare counter at night is a kitchen that starts clean every single morning. They sell you counter organizers now, tiered shelves and caddies and stands to hold all the things that live on your counter. She didn't own a single one because nothing lived on her counter. The answer was never a better place to keep the clutter. The answer was the clutter not being there. Number 11, she cleaned as she cooked and the sink was empty before she sat down. The pot she finished with got washed while the next thing simmered. The cutting board got rinsed and put up the moment she was done with it. By the time dinner hit the table, the kitchen behind her was already clean. There was no mountain of dishes waiting after the meal because there was never allowed to be a mountain. Modern cooking has taught us to make the whole mess and deal with it later. Later is how clutter is born. Every dish left in the sink is permission for the next one. And by morning, the sink is full and the counter is the drying rack and the whole room feels heavy before the day even starts. She kept a bowl of soapy water in the sink and moved through the meal cleaning behind herself. so there was never a later to dread. She sat down to eat with her family in a clean kitchen. That was the reward, and she gave it to herself every single night. Number 10. One good skillet did the work of a whole drawer of gadgets. She had a cast iron skillet, a heavy pot, a couple of good knives, a wooden spoon, and not much else. That skillet fried the eggs, seared the chicken, baked the cornbread, cooked the greens, and made the gravy. One pan. Every job. We have been sold the opposite idea, that every task needs its own tool. The avocado slicer, the banana slicer, the garlic press, the egg separator, the strawberry huller, the quesadilla maker shoved in the back of the cabinet used twice. The single-use kitchen gadget industry exists for one reason: to convince you that your hands and a knife are not enough. Every one of those tools is a thing to store, a drawer that won't close, a cabinet you have to dig through. She separated an egg with the shell in her hand. She smashed garlic with the flat of the knife. One pan, a knife, and a spoon, and the drawer closed easy because there was almost nothing in it. Number 9. She never bought a thing to store things in. Look at how she stored food, and you'll find not one purchase container in the kitchen. The coffee came in a can, and when it was empty, the can held bacon grease or dried beans or buttons. The lard tin held flour. Glass jars from jam and pickles were washed and lined up to hold sugar, rice, cornmeal, leftovers. The bread bag was folded and reused. Nothing was thrown out that could hold something else. The food storage container industry is worth billions of dollars a year now. The matching sets, the pop-top canisters, the stackable systems you buy to organize a kitchen and then have to find room to store when they're empty. She spent $0 on any of it because every container she needed arrived for free inside something she'd already bought. The jar that held the jam held the beans next. Nothing was single purpose, and nothing was bought just to hold something else. The clutter of empty containers we all fight. She never had it because she never bought them. Number 8. 3 things cleaned the entire kitchen. Under her sink, there was no wall of bottles. There was baking soda, a jug of white vinegar, and a box of salt. That was the cleaning cabinet. The baking soda scoured the pots in the sink and took the smell out of the icebox. The vinegar cut grease, shined the windows, and wiped the counters. The salt scrubbed the cast iron without stripping it. Walk down the cleaning aisle now, and there is a different spray for every surface: one for glass, one for granite, one for stainless, one for wood, one for the bathroom that somehow can't touch the kitchen. A dozen bottles, a dozen chemicals, a whole cabinet full, most of them half used and shoved under the sink. It is a marketing invention. The surfaces did not change. The number of products they could sell you to clean them did. 3 things: a box, a jug, and a can. Her whole kitchen was clean, and the cabinet under the sink had room to spare. Number 7. She bought only what she would actually use. She shopped small and she shopped often, or she shopped the season and put it up herself. But either way, nothing came into that kitchen that didn't have a plan. She was not buying in bulk to save 11 cents and then watching it go stale in the back of the cabinet. She bought the flour she'd bake with, the beans she'd cook, the greens she'd eat that week. Here is the quiet truth about a cluttered pantry. Most of it is not food you're keeping. It is food you're storing guilt in. The bulk buy you'll never finish. The specialty jar you used once. The impulse box that's now expired. Clutter is very often just delayed regret over something you shouldn't have bought. She didn't have an expired shelf because she didn't buy things she wasn't going to use. The warehouse store wants you to buy the giant everything. She bought what she needed, and her shelves held food, not regret. If your kitchen is fighting you every single day and someone you love is drowning in theirs too, A mother, a sister, a friend surrounded by bins and gadgets and stuff? Hit the like button right now. 1 second. It puts this video in front of them. They need this more than they know. Then stay, because number 1 is the rule that makes every other habit on this list work. Number 6, Saturday was the reset. Once a week, everything got pulled forward and put right. The shelves wiped, the jars checked, the icebox cleared of anything turning, the floor swept and mopped, the whole kitchen brought back to zero. It took an hour, maybe 2, and then the week could start clean. Clutter and grime don't arrive all at once. They creep a little each day. And without a reset, the creep becomes the new normal until you can't see it anymore. She never let a week's worth of creep become a month's, because every Saturday she pulled it back to the beginning. The reset was not a deep clean emergency. It was maintenance, small and regular, which is the only kind of cleaning that ever actually keeps a kitchen clean. She wasn't chasing mess that had gotten out of hand. She never let it get out of hand in the first place. 1 hour, once a week, and the kitchen never got away from her. Number 5, cloth, not paper. There was a stack of dish towels and a drawer of cloth napkins and an apron on the hook, and she used them, washed them, and used them again. There was no roll of paper towels being torn through and thrown away, no packages of paper napkins and paper plates taking up a cabinet and filling the trash. Paper goods are a strange kind of clutter. You buy them to make life easier, and they take up space in the cabinet, run out constantly, need rebuying forever, and fill the garbage can twice as fast. A cloth towel does everything a paper one does, and then goes in the wash and comes back. She kept a dozen towels and never bought another for years. The trash filled slower. The cabinet held food instead of paper. And nothing had to be replaced on a schedule, because cloth doesn't run out, it just gets washed. Number 4, dry goods lived in glass jars out where she could see them. Flour, sugar, cornmeal, rice, dried beans, each in a clear glass jar. Lined up on the shelf, the same jars, year after year. Not in their torn paper sacks slumping over in the cabinet. Not in 6 different half-open bags, in glass, visible, uniform, sealed. This did 3 things at once. It kept the pests and the moisture out, so nothing spoiled and had to be thrown away. It let her see exactly how much she had at a glance, so she never overbought and never ran short. And it turned a cabinet of messy bags into a neat, calm shelf. The pantry organization industry sells you this exact idea now for a small fortune in matching containers. She did it with the jars the jam came in. She opened the cabinet and saw order, because everything was in the same kind of jar and she could read the whole pantry in one look. Number 3, the kitchen wasted nothing, so nothing sat around going bad. Nothing in that kitchen died a slow death in the back of a shelf. The bones from Sunday's chicken went into a pot for stock. The bacon grease went in the can by the stove to cook with all week. The vegetable ends, the stale bread, the last of everything got used, turned into something or fed to the garden. Leftovers were dinner tomorrow, not a science experiment forgotten in the icebox. A huge amount of what clutters a modern kitchen is rot in waiting, the half-used jar, the leftovers nobody will eat, the produce liquefying in the drawer, the containers of things you're seeing. She didn't save things to throw away later. She used them up. The kitchen moved in a circle, everything flowing forward into the next meal, so nothing piled up because nothing sat still long enough to pile. An empty icebox at the end of the week wasn't a sign she was out of food. It was a sign nothing had been wasted. That was the whole point. Number 2, she owned things that lasted, so nothing was ever being replaced. The cast iron skillet was older than she was. The heavy enamel pot, the Pyrex bowls, the good knife, she bought them once or inherited them, and she kept them for 40 years. They were made to last a lifetime, and they did. And because they lasted, she was never out buying new ones, never accumulating the old broken ones, never cycling stuff in and out of her cabinets. We buy the cheap pan that warps in 2 years and gets replaced, and the old one goes in a cabinet instead of the trash, and the replacements pile up. A kitchen full of things that don't last is a kitchen that's always half full of things on their way out. Hers was full of things on their way to her grandchildren. She seasoned that skillet for decades, and it only got better. You cannot clutter a kitchen with things that never need replacing. She proved it for 50 years. When I started pulling this together, I expected to find that these women just had less, that a bare 1955 kitchen was poverty, not wisdom. That is not what the record shows. What the record shows is a whole way of running a kitchen that had not yet been broken apart and sold back in pieces. Not one habit on this list required a subscription, a container set, a gadget, or an organizing system. Several of them saved money instead of spending it. What they required was knowledge and a little discipline, handed from a mother to a daughter standing beside her at the sink. And here is the part that matters most. Every clutter problem you have was answered on this list by owning less. And every solution the modern world sells you answers it by owning more. More bins, more organizers, more gadgets to store the stuff you shouldn't have bought. The organizing industry does not want your kitchen empty. It wants your kitchen full of its products. They didn't sell you a clear kitchen. They sold you a prettier way to hold the clutter and then charged you to store the storage. Number one is where that lands hardest. Number one, everything had a home and nothing came in that didn't earn one. This is not a product. It is the rule underneath every other habit on this list. Two things really, and they worked together. First, every single item in that kitchen had one specific place it lived, and it went back there the moment she was done with it. Nothing was ever set down. It was put away to its home every time. A thing with a home is never clutter, because clutter is just things with nowhere to go. When everything has a place, tidying isn't a chore you dread. It's just returning things home all day without thinking. And second, the part the whole world has forgotten. She did not let things into the kitchen in the first place. Nothing came through that door unless it had a job and a home waiting for it. No gadget bought on a whim. No container without a purpose. No thing kept just in case. The clutter never had to be organized because it was never allowed to accumulate. She guarded the door, not the drawers. That is the thing that was taken. Not the jars, not the skillet. You can still buy those. The rule. The discipline of less passed hand to hand, mother to daughter at the sink, a whole way of thinking that said the kitchen serves the family. The family does not serve a room full of stuff. The industry stepped into that kitchen and said, you don't need her old discipline. You need our new systems. And the door swung open and the stuff poured in, and 100 years of knowing how to live with less went quiet one kitchen at a time. That woman passed on years later, and her daughter went through the kitchen to divide it up, and there was almost nothing to divide because there had never been almost anything. A skillet worth keeping, a recipe box, a few good jars, and the daughter took the skillet home and set it on her own stove, and found herself that night wiping her own counter down to bare before bed, because her mother's hands had shown her 1,000 evenings exactly how a kitchen was supposed to end the day. The 12 habits that kept that kitchen clear cost nothing. Across a whole year, less than one trip to the organizing store cost you now. None required a subscription. None required a bin, a system, or a single thing to buy. None required believing that the answer to too much stuff was somehow more stuff to hold it. What changed between her kitchen and yours was not what a kitchen needs. That has not changed. What changed was who got paid when the door swung open. So pick up the rule. Pick one habit from this list: the bare counter at night, the 3 cleaners, the door you guard, and start it this week. Come back in the comments in a month and tell me what your kitchen looks like. And tell me one more thing down there while you're at it. Which of these did your mother or your grandmother actually do? Whose kitchen was always clean no matter when you walked in? I read every single comment. The next video is ready. I'll see you there.